Welcome back to Arise News Hour. I'm Charles Aniegolu. Now, as you know, US President Donald Trump, in a speech that lasted just a few minutes, overturned decades of US policy when he recognized the disputed city of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. The move has been met with mixed reaction in Africa. It was greeted with dismay in Egypt, which described it as a bad idea. And Al-Shabaab, the deadliest Islamist extremist group in Africa, said the decision was evidence of an escalation in aggression against Islam and urged Muslims in Africa to take up arms in response to the move. But the rest of Africa appears to have reacted rather pragmatically to the decision. Well, let's get more on this now from the African Affairs analyst, John Ofe-Ansah, who joins me in the studio now. Good to see you, John. Let's begin with Al-Shabaab. You know, the so-called deadliest Islamist extremist group in Africa, calling on all Muslims to raise arms and defend Jerusalem from what they called the Zionist occupiers supported by America. Their statement said that what was taken by force can only be restored by force. What do you make of that reaction?
Well, if Al-Shabaab, had taken, any other stance, or had come up with any other response, I would have said the Pope was a Muslim, yeah.
Which he clearly isn't.
He isn't, yeah. So, but it is to be expected, Of course, Al-Shabaab, as you said, is the deadliest, jihadist group, on the continent, apart from Boko Haram, right? And Israeli, was very, helpful to the Kenyan security forces when the Al-Shabaab attacked the Westgate Mall.
Right.
In 2013.
So it's personal?
It's personal. And again, Israeli security and agents are all over the place. They're in Kenya, Uganda, and and Ethiopia.
Right.
Trying to help fight, the group. Yeah.
So presumably other groups like Boko Haram, who are the other big terror group in Africa, would share that sentiment. I mean, is that likely to make Africa less safe for Americans? Because already the US State Department has sent out security alerts across the continent to all their embassies there.
Well, Africa, I believe Africa will be safe. Because if anything, these two deadly groups, might take the fight, to America, on American soil, just for the effect to be felt.
Right.
Other than that, no, we mustn't forget the attack on the American embassy in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania in 1998, and I think one also in Kenya, right? So if they would they would rise up, right? The attacks would be either on American soil or on American installations on the continent.
Well, that's the concern of Americans, which is why they're sending alerts to all their embassies. But let's talk about reaction from the rest of Africa. Israel has, of course, been mounting an aggressive charm offensive, and the rest of Africa appears to be becoming quite pragmatic about relations with everyone from China to Israel. So is pragmatism versus standing on principle the new sort of African foreign policy?
Well, pragmatism is always good, in political, economic, personal lives, pragmatism is always good. But we mustn't forget that most of Black Africa, is majority Christian.
Right.
Okay, I'm a Christian, I think you are Christian too. And they tend to view Israel from that biblical perspective, as Israel being the chosen people.
Right. I want to get to that in a minute,
okay.
Because what I want us to just get out of the way is the fact that people like Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu actually attended the ECOWAS, Economic Community of West African States Summit in June, July this year, which is quite unprecedented. And these African countries are saying, look, Israel has water technology, it has a thriving economy, it has IT, it has something to offer. And they're looking out for their self-interest more and more.
Yes, it's a quid pro quo, okay? Israel, look, Sub-Saharan Africa consists of 48 nations, right, all at the UN, right? And these 48 nations constitute a big voting bloc in the UN, or at the UN, okay? So Israel is has embarked on this charm offensive to woo the Africans to their side, to change their voting patterns,
right?
When it comes to Israeli settlements,
which has tended to be on the other side, hasn't it?
And again, Africa, as always, needs the expertise. I mean, I remember way back in the 70s when, after the Yom Kippur War of 1973,
right,
when most Africans, in solidarity with the Arab nations, Egypt and the other nations, severed diplomatic ties with Israel. But even then, trade, though on a small scale, was still going on.
Right.
And they also relied, I remember Ghana, at the Accra Tema metropolis in Ghana, the sewage system, I think, was built by the Israelis. So when there was a problem, they had to go back to Israel.
Right, to get them to fix it,
Yeah, and again, look, Israel is offering assistance in agriculture
right,
and irrigation.
So again, that pragmatic versus principle.
Yes, when you go to East Africa, Kenya, Ethiopia,
right,
and so forth, they are offering, innovation, help with innovation, right, and everything. So these are the things that Africa needs. And the help, this assistance Israel is offering Africa, the assistance is tailored. It's not a one-size-fits-all assistance. It's tailored to
each country.
To meet each
okay,
country's needs.
In the little time we've got left, let's talk about the other thing that you brought up earlier. Of course, Jerusalem is perhaps the most contested patch of real estate in the world, wrestled over for hundreds of thousands of years, and the Christians in Africa have traditionally viewed it as belonging to the quote-unquote chosen people, haven't they? I mean, strong evangelical supports there.
Yes, I mean, like I said earlier on, the majority of Africans are Christians, okay?
Right.
And they usually, last night I was discussing this with my sister who is a reverend, and she quoted, copiously from the Bible, ran some parallels. Okay, they see, like I said, Israel as God's chosen, and Jerusalem
right,
as a holy place. And most Africans, actually, Christians, go on annual pilgrimages to that place, to see Jesus, the sacred tomb or whatever it's called. To do that. So I'm not surprised. Most Africans or no African government has so far come out, to criticize Donald Trump's decision. They see it as a matter of course. Jerusalem should be, the capital.
And of course, it is also politically sensitive, isn't it? I mean, if you look at a country like Nigeria, that's almost equally divided between Christians and Muslims. You don't want to say anything to upset the Christians or the Muslims. So it's best to just keep quiet. It's interesting that we've seen opposition to the U.S. move to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital from the Pope. I mean, and of course, Africa has millions of Catholics, but on the point of Jerusalem, many of them likely to disagree with the pontiff.
Yes, I think the pontiff's view, was rather maybe was just try to play. I won't say play to the gallery, but in the role of a peacemaker. Because if you look at the text of his statement, he wanted, a resolution or maybe a division between of Jerusalem between the Palestinians and the Israelis. So his statement was in the role of a peacemaker.
Right, but that's essentially what, at the moment, Jerusalem is actually divided. West Jerusalem and East Jerusalem. So just based on your assessment of all of this then, your sense is that there will be no strong reaction beyond these Islamist groups and is Egypt, which is a traditional ally of the United States, coming up and saying it's a bad idea, but nothing much stronger than that.
I don't see that happening. And we shouldn't forget that America, though Donald Trump hasn't come up with any definitive policy on Africa. Still, America has some leverage, economic and political leverage over Africa. I'm not sure any African leader is going to criticize this move.
Okay, John, thank you very much indeed. John Ofe Ansah, the African Affairs Analyst.